Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Reveal Report. Thank you for being here today on a Monday. Unfortunately, we are not live tonight because our guest is in London, in the UK. So we couldn't do it live because it would be like 3, 4 in the morning or something around that time for him. So we had to record it. So again, this has been pre-recorded this afternoon. It's going up live right now so everyone can see. And then following this broadcast, we are going to be doing a special Q&A as always on Patreon. The link is in the description. So click the link and join me and Jessie for a Q&A following this show about this show and giving you a chance to ask questions about maybe something you've been wanting to know. So let's get into it. It's going to be a great show, guys, as we get into the Knights Templars' hidden treasures. They say that they had all this gold. They said they had all this power and money, and this was hidden. And there were like messages that were written on different stones hidden all over the place around the world. Some of these stones were found in the US, right here in America. There's also a conspiracy theory that they may have held the Holy Grail. Some wild stuff. The Knights Templar, this type of secret society, was supposed to help people. And we all know the story of how nefarious it became when they were captured by the king, and they were doing some really dark satanic rituals underneath the Vatican or whatever the place was that they were. I'm sure our guest, Mr. Tony McMahon, is going to fill us in a little bit more on that. Before we get into it, special thanks going out to Lisa M. Lisa, thank you for last week and again tonight for the amazing contribution on Patreon and on PayPal. Because of you, we keep the show going here on YouTube and not exclusive to just Patreon members, but for all to share. So give Lisa M a big thank you in the comments. We appreciate her love and support every single week. And if you want to support, go to paypal.me/George Iceman. Link is in the description. Let's keep the show going every Monday here on YouTube. Much is appreciated. Okay, without further ado, let me bring my co-host and author who's got many books. Please welcome Miss Jessie Czebotar. Jessie, how are you?
Hey, doing well.
Well, today we're going to bring back a guest that we had about 2 months ago, and he did a phenomenal show. He's an author, and he's one of those guys who just seems to have all the information and did a lot of research on the Knights Templar. Without further ado, please welcome Mr. Tony McMahon. Tony, welcome back.
Hi, hello. I'm sorry I'm not live. I was live last time, but
yes,
I've got an early start tomorrow, so I can't join you in the middle of the night. But it's the middle of the night here. It's suitably spooky here in London. We're already plunged into darkness here, which seems appropriate for the topic.
Wow. Well, we're going to get right into it. The Knights Templar. So the Knights Templar, they say, Tony, that they had a lot of wealth. They accumulated much riches, gold, gifts, things that were given to them. So I want you to kind of fill us in about the money, not where it's hidden right now, but just its worth. What would be the value today of some of these goods that they would have accumulated over the years of being in power?
So you got the thing about the Knights Templar, people don't appreciate this always, is they were warriors. They were great on the battlefield, but they were also very good with money. They were very adept they were a money-making machine, basically. I mean, they had all these farms and kind of what you might call businesses around Europe, but they also were in money lending. They were also in loan collection. But we also think that they got their hands on some very, very priceless holy relics as well. But there's no doubt that the Knights Templar got very rich very quick. And a lot of people were jealous, angry about the Knights Templar, especially in the church. Priests and bishops and archbishops who thought this money should be coming to us, not the Knights Templar. And they hated the sight of the Templars, so rich, with this well-oiled, well-funded fighting machine. So they had their admirers, but they also made a lot of enemies as they got richer and more powerful.
All right, I have to say this because this is important. They were rich. They accumulated a lot of money and wealth. Jessie, here's where you're going to come in. Where did they learn this? Who would have given them the knowledge? If these are warriors And soldiers of the battlefield, I mean, I wouldn't be a expert on this type of thing, but who taught them? Who educated them on how to, I would say, control the masses and lending and borrow? That sounds like more those higher up, the intelligent people that are out there. But I've heard occultically, they had a spiritual connection, spiritual guidance. So I'm going to throw this to Jessie first.
Yeah.
She could fill us in, and we'll get to you, Tony. Jessie, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, my thoughts on that, I think it comes from the Sanhedrin, who both, they were keepers of the law, the knowledge, as well as the holy things of God. Eventually, they took over the priests, the temple, especially during the time with Rome. So I would say it mostly comes from that, would be my guess, but there may be some other influences as time goes on.
All right. Okay. So that would be your
That's my
theory on
guess.
that. That's your guess. Okay, Tony, talk to us. Where do you think, from your research or what you could piece together, this knowledge, this information? Did they hire a banker? How did they figure out how to accumulate such wealth and, like you said, go into lending and borrowing money?
Yeah, I remember they were doing things. I mean, that was supposed to be illegal. Usury, as they call it, was a crime. And in fact, normally it was only Jewish people who were allowed to do it because the Jews were barred from doing anything else. So they went into usury, and Christians weren't supposed to make interest on money. And yet somehow the Templars bent the rules. And where did they learn how to do that? I mean, the part of France where a lot of the Templars came from had a lot of markets. Troy, the city of Troy, was famous for its kind of its international fairs. People used to come and trade, so they may have got it from there. You're talking there, Jessie, about stuff they may have learnt in Jerusalem, ancient knowledge. You got to remember that they were based on top of what had been the temple in Jerusalem, where the Sanhedrin was based, which was destroyed by the Romans. People think they were digging underneath, looking for knowledge, looking for wisdom, looking for riches. Another more intriguing prospect, why don't we just let it out there? Remember, in their trials, they were accused of worshipping a demon, the demon Baphomet. There was a Templar who confessed to this, Jean de Chalon, who said that the Templars had worshipped a head. This head called Baphomet, and Baphomet because it's he's on every death metal T-shirt and album. The horned beast and so on. So one of the things that was said in their trials was that this demon gave them instructions, gave them orders. And if they were taking orders from this demon from day one, did the demon tell them how to make money?
Yeah. So there was a woman many years ago who was investigating Ouija boards, and she would communicate with the spiritual realm, and this spiritual realm gave her a new Ouija board design. This is interesting. So she redesigned this Ouija board, and she got into communication. Somehow, during this, they got into discussing the Knights Templar. And the spirits that came across had mentioned that the Templars have done a deal, and they were taught the ways of money lending. They were taught how to manipulate the system, how to get the riches, how to control the masses by putting people into debt and slavery and holding a debt over them and their homes. I mean, once you're in debt and you got to pay interest, back then, if you didn't have interest, I mean, what do you give them? Your donkey? You give them your home? You give them your barn? You give them your goats? You give them your animals? You need to eat off this. This is some real crazy stuff that we're discussing, but that seems to be what the synopsis was that she came across from this. Now, again, she could be thinking it. She may have read it. She could be a charlatan, but who knows? What are your thoughts on that? Jessie, I'll begin with you.
Yeah, it's curious. Could they be getting it from those sources? I believe they could. I think you get a lot of information that comes from different spirit beings, as Tony was saying. Templars claiming that they got it from Baphomet. So I think it's very plausible.
Very plausible. Okay, Tony, your thoughts on where do you think this this type of? I know you touched on it briefly, the Baphomet, but like if you break it down, man, I was thinking about this, and I'm like, how back then? Yes, there's the swindle that you learn from the markets. There's the swindle, the fast talk. You know what I mean? And there's those things, but we're going to get into the riches and the amount of money. That just doesn't happen with a simple swindle, does it, Tony?
Well, I mean, and you know, nobody likes bankers. They never have done, and they didn't like the Templars. I'm telling you. And people did owe money to them, and they felt, you know, I mean, the King of France, you know, owed money to them, and of course, one of the first things he did when he crushed them was to cancel his own debts. You know, he wasn't going to pay anybody back. And King of England, actually, on one occasion, even broke into the Templar headquarters to basically grab his money back. It's King Edward, but. You know what? One of the things that I have to mention the fact I've got a new book out on the Templars, my second book out on the Templars, Downfall of the Templars. And one of the things that, thank you for that. And one of the things that I'm arguing in that book is that they were put on trial on exactly the same charges that witches were put on trial for. You know, effectively they were accused of witchcraft. So you're coming to your whole thing about demons and controlling people and so on. And I found it fascinating that, you know, this was. People normally say, "Oh, the witchcraft trials got going in the 1400s and went on to the end of the 17th century with Salem and all that." But actually, this is the 1300s, right? But it was already kicking off, and at the same time, the Templars were on trial. The King of France was already going after a group of women preachers called the Beguines, and they were burned to death at the same time as the Templars. Yeah. He also accused a bishop of Troyes of murdering the queen using potions and spells. And he also tried to put a dead pope on trial for diabolism, who he didn't like because this pope didn't let him raise taxes on the church. So there's a lot of witchcraft, heresy stuff. And I think he genuinely believed the witchcraft stuff. I think there was growing belief in witchcraft. It wasn't just, it was opportunistic to a degree, but I think people were beginning to genuinely believe that sorcery, the devil, you know, was abroad on the face of Europe, that real evil was out there, and the Templars got swept up in this. And the same people prosecuting these early witches were prosecuting the Templars on pretty much the same charges. And you know, this idea then of worshipping demons, of having these initiation rituals, and of receiving orders from satanic forces and being able to control people, and what they were doing to their initiates as well in these rituals. So, you know, we have to come into a different mindset, you know, of what people thought the Templars were. But I definitely think that the propaganda line that was pushed was it's not just that, you know, they're nasty bankers or they're traitors or whatever. It's that they are in league with Satan. In fact, the arrest warrant said they are crucifying Jesus a second time, is what they said. You know.
Wow. See, the wording was they crucifying Jesus a second time. The wording is to send shockwaves and really make you feel uncomfortable, so that you could look at them in a negative way. I want to rally back quickly to who they worship before we got into the lost treasures. Again, important. Baphomet. This symbol now represents, Satanism and so forth. They have their own take on this. They say that this is, freedom, and, it has nothing to do with the supernatural. There's many takes on this, but you see this usually on rock metal bands that support Satanism. They push this towards the youth, the Church of Satan. In fact, one of the statues is from the Church of Satan right there. Baphomet, it's a goat head with a man, or is it a man, half woman? It's got wings. Interesting stuff. Jesse, let me begin with you. If you could just give a quick rundown to our audience who are just joining us, maybe never watched this before. Who is Baphomet?
Yeah, I identify him in my coaching series, the architecture, altars, and then unveiling the system, as one of the major principalities and authorities that oversees nations, quadrants. You know, he's highly worshipped all over the world. This statue is from the Satanic Temple. But you have him connected to the sovereign military order. And they're going to, make oaths. They're going to take vows in the name of they actually call him Baphomet. And there's going to be certain signs or symbols. One of them that is recognized with him, like you see the hands, the two fingers pointed up, the two fingers pointed down. That's the as above, so it is below symbol. And you also get the pentacle, which when you study Kabbalah magic, you know that goes even deeper, that pentacle is representing the top half of the Kabbalah tree. And with it, you're going to have a connection to Nehushtan, which was the serpent raised up by Israel that they worshipped in the desert. And then, so there's a lot packed into that statue. And you also get the tuft of hair between the horns, which, looks like a torch, but representing your order of Melchizedek.
Man, so much coming from that, Jessie, and we appreciate that rundown for those new. Tony, in your search for the information about the Knights Templars, anything you came across in regards to Baphomet and them that you could add for our audience?
There's a lot. I mean, when you actually go back to that time, there's a lot of confusion. People don't, people didn't really understand. A lot of people who were commenting at the time, who were often attacking the Templars, tried to get to grips with what Baphomet. Some of them thought, by the way, it meant Muhammad, believe it or not. But Muslims. But Muslims do not worship graven images, so it's that doesn't make any sense, And some of them realized it might have had a hermetic, as Jessie was saying, as above, so below. That there's the kind of hermetic wisdom or linked to the Kabbalah. Or there was this idea that maybe the Templars had kind of picked up other beliefs in the East, Gnostic beliefs, older forms of Christianity that have been forgotten in the West, those forms of Christianity that may have even questioned the divinity of Jesus, because there were Christians who thought Jesus was human in the early days, but not necessarily divine, and vice versa. Some thought he was totally divine and not at all human. So you have all these very ancient versions of Christianity that have been suppressed in the West and forgotten, but were still circulating in the East, and views that, for example, that John the Baptist was the real Messiah and not Jesus, the Johannites and so on. So, Baphomet may have been, some kind of creed, some belief system that the Templars came across. But then when their enemies tried to report it, they just couldn't get it right. They didn't understand what they were talking about. They just knew the Templars weren't worshipping what they understood to be Christianity. So you have to kind of take their descriptions with a pinch of salt.
Very well. All right. We've covered the Baphomet, the idea of where they got this information for coins and banking and lending, because that's like bankers almost. And like you said yourself, the king was financially in debt to these people. This is insane. Can you imagine if the president of the United States was controlled and in debt to the military? Can you imagine they dictate? How would that be? Let's just take that scenario. From then to now, how would the world be if our prime ministers and presidents around the world had to do what the military told them? We begin with you, Jessie, first.
I think that would impact a lot because, especially in our government, we're a republic, and that means that we have the right to vote certain positions or government officials into office. And in that, that gives way to our voice in legislation or different administrative processes or judicial processes within our government. So I would see that would have a huge impact if really behind the scenes you had a secret military, operating, running things, and really being the true governance. And I think in some ways it is that way.
Wow. Okay. Tony, your thoughts. What would happen if there was a secret military that was actually controlling the government? Because that's what it looks like in this point in time. The kings were in debt to them and so forth. Even though they may have passed laws, they were in financial crisis, in debt to like this military. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, just to kind of get, people's minds around it, imagine that you have a kind of, what do you call it, like an army, a private army within the United States,
Yeah.
right? And they run, imagine today, if they existed today, imagine you've got this army. They're not accountable to the president, they're accountable to somebody else in another country. Then imagine that they own banks on Wall Street. Then imagine that as you say, the president is in debt to them, and he has to have them as his advisors, which is what the kings of Europe had the Templars. They were able to sit at the table, with the king, because they were bankers, they were running this army. So the king president today in the US doesn't run this army, has no control over them. They're immensely wealthy. He's in debt to them. They also sit at the top table and make decisions, and they have a whole kind of way of doing things behind closed doors that nobody knows anything about. So you can imagine how freaky. I mean, if we want to feel sorry for the King of France who crushed them, it's pretty freaky. You think, what are they doing? Well, I don't control them. All I know is I've got massive debts to them, that everybody I know says they're up to something weird behind closed doors, but nobody seems to be sure what it is. They're immensely wealthy. I don't have their money. I don't control them. This is a really, from the point of view of the King of France, a very unsatisfactory situation. So you can kind of understand why he went after them in the end. I'm not condoning it, but you can understand why he did it.
Of course. Okay. They've assembled a fortune. They are in control. They are basically some of the most powerful people in that territory, in that land, if not the world, because of the debt that they've accumulated with people. They don't have debt. People have debt to them. They created their own coin. Here's a picture of some of the coins that they've created. This is also known as the Solomon coin, and this is the Knights Templars coin. Here's another, and they're in museums. There's copies of this. They've created their own coin. Guys, what I'm saying is they created their own currency. They created a coin out of their own authority and put it out there, and it was accepted. That in itself deserves a minute of conversation before we even get into how much they accumulated. Jessie, begin with you. How bizarre is that? That again, a secret military had decided to create their own currency and it was accepted. What are your thoughts on that?
I don't think that, government officials in those days had a real ability to decline, and from what I understand, the money was made out of precious materials, so that in itself had value. But it's curious that here they were producing mass amounts of money and have their entire own government, their own military, their own currency, and it seems like really the world revolves around them, not the other way around.
Tony, thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, for one thing, you've got to imagine that the Templar commanderies, their fortresses, were also like fortified banks. Imagine going to your bank and it's there's soldiers basically running the show. I mean, that's how weird it is. But also, there's a story that the King of France, one of the Louis, was on crusade. I think it's in the Third Crusade, and he's there. He's fighting the Saracens. He's fighting the Muslim enemy, and he runs out of money. And he basically has to go to the Templars in the middle of this war that he's fighting, and he has to say, "Oh, can you contact your guys in Paris, and I'll contact my guy, and then they'll arrange for some money to, you basically saying to the Templars, I can't fund my own war. Can you fund this war? Otherwise, I'm going to get killed out here." So that's the kind of dependency that they have. So the Templars are actually funding the king's war. And there's even at one point the King of France, and I think the King of England as well at another point, but definitely the King of France, actually even handed over the whole state finances to the Templars to run. Basically said, you guys seem to know what you're doing. You run the state finances. So they can see everything. They're in control of everything. That's immense. That's like the Federal Reserve being handed over to a private army, to give you an idea of how weird that is.
It's quite bizarre, to be honest with you, Tony. Again, I'm just, as a regular person watching from the outside, I'm asking these questions because none of this seems real. What you got a secret military who runs the government that the government is in debt to. You have them creating their own currency. Can you imagine this today? You got them are the banking system, military. You don't pay, they kill you, or they take you prisoner, or they take your things. Who do you go? Here's the best part. Who do you go to if you can't pay? You can't go to the police and say, listen, these people are threatening me, because they are the police. They are in full control. They've had a whole monopoly on this. And now you're telling me that the king wants them to fund their war.
Yeah.
It's
No,
wild.
I'll give you an even better one. Something
Yeah.
There's a friend of mine's historian. He's just written a book on the assassins. You know, the assassins. This murder cult death cult that everybody was, scared that they went round. They basically assassinated both Christian and Muslim rulers they didn't like, but they would go with a dagger, kill leading political rulers, and then disappear into the night if they could, or they were just killed on the spot. They were a real sort of suicide cult. But the only people who managed not only to kind of best them militarily, the Templars even managed to extort money out of them. I mean, they actually managed for decades to screw money out of the assassins. I mean, that is how not only brave, but how completely cheeky you get. It's the only word I can think of, really.
Yeah.
Here's an organization everybody's terrified of, but the Templars, because they are so strong, so disciplined, so ruthless, actually go to the Templars and say, if you don't pay up, we're going to kill you. And the assassins go, yeah, anybody else we wouldn't take that from, but you guys will pay up. And they do.
And they do.
Yeah.
Wild. So they've accumulated a fortune. They have tons of power. They're now into what you call extortion and a few other things, all illegal activities. They're performing rituals underneath a church. We found that out. They have a unbelievable order. But let's get into it. The lost treasure of the Knights Templar, the hidden secrets of this ancient order. It is an ancient order. There is a rumor. There is conspiracy. Many scholars have discussed that there is a lost treasure or treasures in different parts of the world. Jessie, let's begin with you. Have you heard of this rumor or this conspiracy that there is treasure hidden in either a place or different places around the world that belongs to the Knights Templar?
I have heard that, and it gets very interesting because you get different places around the world, whether that's, off of islands or underground in caves, pretty much all over the place, even in Masonic lodges, that they hid treasures behind the capstones on the Masonic lodges. So there's curious things with all of that.
Did not know that. All right, Tony, let's throw it to you now. Lost treasure. It's a conspiracy or not? What's going on? Talk to us about this. What do you know?
Okay, George. It's shameless plug for that book again.
Yeah.
Go ahead and plug it.
Come on, I'm an author. I've got to sell.
Absolutely.
Okay, I have a chapter in there defining what the treasure may have been. So if they were holy relics, was it the Holy Grail? Did it include the shroud even? They've been accused of having the head of John the Baptist, head of Jesus, etc. Then I've got a chapter about this theory that they may have been able to get their treasure out of France before they were arrested and taken it on ships to Scotland. So I do Scotland as one chapter, where the king, Robert the Bruce, who you'll remember from Braveheart, had been excommunicated. So the theory is that he would have been friendly to the Templars because he wasn't getting on with the Pope either. And the Pope was, crushing the Templars. So they collaborated, and the Templars took their treasure there. And from there, they collaborated with a local family called the Sinclairs. And ultimately, they took their treasure to the New World 100 years before Columbus. And then, the theory that they may have buried their treasure at a place called Oak Island, which has given rise to a multi-season documentary series on the History Channel, people looking for it. The other theory that I look at in another chapter is that they took the treasure to Portugal because the kings down there they were always actually having bust-ups with the Pope. It was a small country on the edge of Europe, but they were very supportive of the Templars. They loved the Templars because the Templars had helped them to push the Muslims out of southern Portugal.
Correct. Yes.
And there's a theory there that some of the treasure may have been buried at a place called Tomar, which I'm visiting in 2 weeks' time, or they may even have taken it. Well, ultimately, what happens to the Templars in Portugal, which is really interesting, is that they are rebranded as a new organization by the king. Yes. Instead of being crushed like they are in France, the King of Portugal says, well, I won't torture you and execute you. I'm just going to rename you, and I'm going to be your Grand Master. And they call it Order of Christ. And yes. Then the theory is that let the king protect the order, but also let the king kind of get his hands on their treasure and their wealth as well. But it's the Order of Christ that leads those famous voyages of discovery that the Portuguese do to Brazil and out to Japan, India. Yes. Yeah. And they put these crosses up wherever they go. Yes. And on the ships, you don't see the flag of Portugal, you see the cross of the Order of Christ. So their Order of Christ ship. You know, all these famous people, Vasco da Gama and all these people. Yes. They were all in the Order of Christ. So did they take
Magellan,
all of the Order of Christ, Ordem do Cristo, as it was called. Yeah. And so did they take both the kind of Templar mission, if you want, to the New World, but did they also take Templar treasure, or did the Templar treasure fund those voyages of discovery? And by the way, I also look at alleged links between Christopher Columbus and the Templars. I don't know if you've come across this, but this theory that he was married into a Templar family, that he may also have been involved in hiding Templar treasure as well. But there's basically two theories, that the treasure is spirited out of Paris, from the Paris headquarters, down to a port called La Rochelle, and then does it go to Scotland? Well, I look into that. Or does it go down to Portugal? Two possible routes for Templar treasure. And by the way, if it goes to Scotland, of course, there's a theory that it may have been hidden for a while at Rosslyn Chapel, which, of course, you know from the Da Vinci Code, because that's where that movie ends and so on. And so, yeah, those are two possible routes, Portugal or Scotland. And as I say, I examine both options. Oh, and I should have mentioned, sorry, I'm giving away all of it away now. I also have a chapter on the... I have a chapter on the Nazis as well, because remember, the Nazis went looking for Templar treasure. Yes. A guy called Otto Rahn, this archaeologist that the Nazis employed to go and look for the Templar treasure and the Holy Grail in particular, because the Nazis thought if we can get our hands on the Holy Grail or even the Ark of the Covenant, we could be invincible. So they send this archaeologist off. He doesn't find it, and he's found mysteriously dead on an alpine hill. Frozen to death in 1939. Murder, suicide, we don't know. But you don't let down the Nazis, do you? So if you don't find their treasure, they're not going to forgive you for that, and they didn't forgive him. So there are lots of theories about where the Templar treasure may have ended up.
Okay, you just took this interview into a very fascinating realm and road, which Jessie, that's one thing we do love, is when you don't expect a certain answer, and it's like, wait a minute, let's touch on that for a minute. Okay, the book is called Downfall of the Templars, and you touch on these topics. Obviously, you're giving us a brief on what you look into, what you go into, and you go into more detail, which we appreciate. So people have to get the book to get all these details, which is juicy. I am going to pick your brain a little bit more on this info because it's important.
Oh, sorry. Which bit of it do you want to know more about?
I want to know a little bit more about the Portuguese aspect, because that is a huge aspect of Portugal. It's very prominent in the mainland. I was taught that as well in many different forms. There is the story that they funded these voyages, and they've done a lot. Did they fund when they went to Brazil? Because they said the story is there was Spain that went to conquer Brazil, and they tries to use a fist and a hand and war, and that didn't go over. Then Portugal went there to conquer Brazil, but they used trading, spices and other things to lure them in for necessity that they needed, and then they, through stealth, they took over and conquered Brazil with not as much bloodshed as the Spaniards wanted to. But who funded that, Tony? Well, who was behind that?
you could say the way the Portuguese built their empire is very Templar, because it's that
Yes.
combination. It's that combination of trade, banking, you know,
Yes.
and you know, and kind of soft power as well as, you know. I mean, they certainly use military might as well, but the Portuguese were very good at that kind of yeah, that soft power and finding allies and so on, which is really what the Templars were very good at as well. I mean, I think one of the mistakes that you sometimes find people writing, you know, in regards to the Templars in Portugal, is they say, oh, well, you know, Portugal was such a loyal Catholic country, and the Pope loved it, and you know, and the Templars were loved there, etc. I would just change that slightly. My research actually shows that the kings of Portugal had a terrible relationship with the popes.
Wow.
They basically needed the popes early on when they were trying to establish Portugal as an independent kingdom. You know, because they were trying to break free from both Spain and from Muslim control in the south. They needed the Pope, but they made a lot of concessions to the Pope and to the Church. You know, they gave them a lot of land. They literally had to pay a kind of bribe to the Pope every year for him to continue recognizing Portugal. So they really didn't they were always trying to break free from this. And of course, when the Templars are in trouble with the Pope, you know, why wouldn't the Portuguese help them? Because first of all, the Templars were actually, you know, really important in helping the Portuguese to push the Muslim enemy out in the south, but also occasionally fought the Spanish too. But you know, they were the shock troops who'd help the Portuguese to become an independent country. But now they'd also fallen out with the Pope, and the Portuguese had always had problems with the Pope. So you know, why wouldn't they welcome them? You know, and so you know, you could entertain the idea that the Templars arrive in Portugal. You know, they say, you know, we're in trouble. We're being persecuted. We're being tortured. Some of our brothers have been burned to death. I mean, in Paris, they burned 54 Templars on one day. You know, they come to Portugal and they say, you know, and the King of Portugal, you know, it's a small country as well. What would you do if you were the King of Portugal? You'd say, well, you've always been good to me, but also you're very, very rich. And we're a small country, but we're ambitious, and we've got things we want to do, like discovering the world, for example, because you know, we want to have an empire as well. So why wouldn't the King of Portugal forge an alliance with the Templars? And that's certainly, if you look at what the successor organization did, the Order of Christ, they were at the forefront in the same way the Templars were at the forefront against the Muslims driving them out of Portugal, Spain. They're now at the forefront of discovering the new world. So you kind of see a pattern if you want to.
Yeah. Again, we learned a lot about that. There was a connection about the Order of Christ, like you said, and I'm assuming there was a lot of Templars from France, and there was a French influence, because there's a huge connection between Portugal and France. I mean, they go back and forth. Many Portuguese marry the French, French marry the Portuguese. There's a huge connection there. Can you touch on that briefly a little bit?
Yeah, very quickly. I won't go into dynastic. I mean, obviously, European royal families are all, you know, horribly interbred. But the first King of Portugal, Afonso Henriques, his father was the Duke of Burgundy, and Burgundy actually is pretty much where the Templars came from. And in fact, the first King of Portugal knew Bernard of Clairvaux, was probably related to him actually, who was the bishop, then later a saint, who was the kind of spiritual guide of the Templars. So that link to Burgundy was also linked. Was the first King of Portugal's father was, as you say, the Duke of Burgundy, but also through that family connection, the first King of Portugal was very well connected to the early Templar leadership. So the Templars were always very connected to Portugal, very connected. All
right. We've touched on this connection. We touched on the gold, the possibilities, where the treasure could be. We've gone into this. The last thing I want to touch on, we have a few minutes left here, is the Holy Grail. There's a lot of relics that are out there. But the one thing that say is the Holy Grail, some say that there could be different relics, but a lot of people claim that it was the chalice that they drank at the table for the Last Supper. Some say that is the Holy Grail. There's different theories and so forth. But the Holy Grail, the chalice that was used to drink the wine between Jesus and his followers during the Last Supper had a lot of power. And they say they wanted to harness that power, use it. They maybe could gain from it and use it in spiritual ways that they felt if they had it, that would give them something special. And it was said and rumored through folklore that the Knights Templar may have had that chalice. This is very interesting stuff. So I wanted to touch on this. I'll begin with Jessie. What have you heard? What in your realm and in your circles have you heard about the chalice and the Knights Templar in association to that?
Yeah, well, I think it was really made popular by the Indiana Jones series, where, you know, you see in the Templar of Doom, you see, you know, the Templars, like they go on a voyage, they find the Grail. But in my circles, you know, they have all sorts of artifacts, supposedly. They have places where they're going to hold those. You have some of the churches, basilicas, or cathedrals that are going to display those holy artifacts, including the thorns, you know, that were placed on Christ's head, which are now on display supposedly at Notre Dame. So, you know, they are. It is known that I would say the system, I would include the sovereign military in with that, and the elite, that they have those holy artifacts.
Very interesting. All right, Tony, I'm throwing it to you. Here we go. The chalice, the Holy Grail.
I mean, one of the ways in which the Templars are connected to the Holy Grail is definitely through those stories of King Arthur. And these are stories that are written at the time that the Templars existed by people like Chrétien de Troyes and a German writer called von Eschenbach. And these were Wolfram von Eschenbach. And these guys were around at the same time as the Knights Templar. And Wolfram von Eschenbach, German crusader, he writes this version of the King Arthur story where he has a group of knights guarding the Grail castle, and he calls them in German the Templizer, which sounds pretty much like the Templars. So, and you know, the Nazis were massively into this story of Parzival because their favorite composer, opera composer Wagner, even wrote an opera, Parzival. And so that was really what inspired them to go looking for the Holy Grail. But I think it's through the Arthurian stories that the Templars become connected to the Holy Grail. And, you know, there were stories that they had. I mean, I was in Istanbul earlier this year, where some people argue that they stole the what's now called the Turin Shroud, the shroud that Jesus was buried in. Some people believe that they had other holy relics, like the Crown of Thorns mentioned, that is now in Paris. But also, of course, it's the Holy Grail that's the famous one. The thing about the Holy Grail is a lot of people can't agree what the Holy Grail is, as you know.
Yes, correct.
So some people say it's a cup. Some people say it's the bloodline of Jesus.
Yes.
So one I like is that it's an emerald that popped out of the crown of Lucifer when he was thrown out of heaven. And that emerald became the lapis exilis, you know, the philosopher's stone that the Phoenix sits on and is reborn and all that sort of thing. But in terms of the cup, if we take it as a cup, which is I think what most people think it was, as you say, it's the cup from the Last Supper. So it's the cup that Jesus kind of, when he gives his blood. And then it's the cup that Joseph of Arimathea, who's either the uncle or the great uncle of Jesus, collects blood from the wound in Jesus' side when he's been crucified. And in fact, it's funny, I was in Prague earlier this year, as in the Czech Republic, and I was in a gallery in London looking at medieval art. I love looking at medieval art. And there's all these depictions of medieval art of angels holding the Grail and filling it with, while Jesus has been crucified, these angels are flying around, filling it with blood from all the wounds. So sometimes you get 4 or 5 angels. There's 2 at the wrists, 1 at the side and 1 at the feet, all filling these chalices with blood. But the idea, of course, was that the blood of Jesus, something that will be left behind, and that would have this immense kind of sacral power. And just to add one more thing in, I've got I'm yapping away, but
no, please.
Of course, there is a story. I think I might have mentioned it last time, that the Holy Grail was brought to England by Joseph of Arimathea and buried at Glastonbury, which of course and there's a kind of a stream there that still runs red. Some people say it's the iron oxide in the soil, but others say it's because the chalice is buried there at Glastonbury, and the blood of Jesus flows evermore. And pilgrims have been going there for centuries. But there are several people, claims that there's a Holy Grail in Genoa. I think there's two in Spain. There used to be one in Wales. It's a wooden one, but it's badly broken. But yeah, there's one in Damascus actually, I think. But there used to be about 25 Holy Grails around Europe. But yeah, I mean, a lot of people claim to have it. But the Templars, this idea, they found it in Jerusalem. They hid it. One theory of Rosslyn Chapel, that it was hidden under the nave, and then it may have been taken from there to the New World.
Man, it's unbelievable. Again, I learned something new. I didn't know that specific location in London, where you say the river runs red. Where is that specifically?
Oh no, sorry, Glastonbury. That's a Glastonbury. That's a Glastonbury. Yeah. So Glastonbury is it's a very evocative place. I mean, they have a rock festival every year there now, but it's a place where if you go there, there's a lot of healing shops. There's a big sort of witchcraft scene there as well.
Interesting.
Because it was a Celtic shrine before it was the Christians kind of took it over, and it was originally an island surrounded by swampy marshes. I mean, now it's just there's a kind of hill, and then the abbey is nearby. But the abbey was smashed up by King Henry VIII during the Protestant Reformation, but beautiful ruins. But it did claim to have the Holy Grail. It also claimed to have the bodies of King Arthur and Guinevere, and the bodies of several saints as well. And Joseph of Arimathea basically is supposed to have died there. And before he died, he rammed his staff into the ground, and it grew into a tree. And they claim it's called the Glastonbury thorn, and it's still there. And then there is, as I say, this it's called the Chalice well. I've just remembered, and it runs red with kind of blood-coloured water still. And I've seen it. I went there last year actually, so I can tell you it does have bloody water.
Wow. Tony, you brought some beautiful information that was never shared on the show, and we are grateful and thankful for that. I think I need to do a deep dive into this particular location, because what you say, there has to be a spiritual connection. If witches are conducting any type of rituals in the specific location, if they're opening occult shops, if they're doing festivals, if they're doing things there and there were druids there, then there's a connection. Now, whether there's a portal, a doorway of some sort, Jesse, there's got to be something about this spot. There's got to be some truth to what you're saying, Tony. So we need to do a deep dive. Also, I got to bring you back, maybe touch on that, and maybe touch on this search by the Nazis for relics and the lost treasure of the Templars, because they got deep into it. And like you said, there was a lot of money spent, a lot of people. They had a whole team into that. So that could be maybe the next talk we have when we bring you back, Tony.
Well, they had Himmler, who was obsessed with this stuff, set up a whole division of the SS called the Ananeb. And he had really far out theories about witches, but they all had far out theories about, they thought the Templars, by the way, were part of a kind of, they saw the Templars as being linked to the Cathars, and they were kind of Aryans. I mean, part of the Aryan race theory, and that Jesus was also an Aryan, and that the Templars were actually involved in a kind of like existential battle against the church, and the church was the enemy. But I think we'd have to unpack that in a separate episode, because boy, oh boy, that's a big one too.
Yeah, that'll be the next episode. Tony, I want to thank you so much for being here. A lot of information. Let everybody know how they could support you and buy your book.
They can support this struggling author by buying my book. As ever.
Knights Templar. All right. I appreciate that, Tony. Thank you so much. Jesse, how can people support what you do and learn more about your books and courses?
Yeah, you can find my books, courses, and workshops on kingdomlivingwithjessie.com, as well as my coachings and the Unveiling the System series.
Excellent. Guys, I want to thank you all for watching, especially Lisa M. and everyone else who's contributed to PayPal. Following this show, we are going to Patreon, The Reveal Report. Link is in the description, guys. And me and Jesse are going to do a open roundtable, a Q&A, give you a chance to ask some questions. Be a part of it and join. Come on over and ask some questions because it's going to be a great show, guys. And we want to thank Tony and Jesse for being here. Tony, can't wait to have you back. Thank you so much. Go out and get his book. And guys, on behalf of Jesse, Tony, and myself, we'd like to thank you all for watching. Hope you have a great week, and we'll see you next time. God bless. Good night, everyone.